Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Gray Minds Think Alike. I'm your host, Ali Kessler, and today we have not one, but two very special guests. Backed by popular demand, Dr. Christine Cocchiola, our coercive control expert, is joined by Amy Polacko, founder and CEO of Freedom Warrior Divorce Coaching, to discuss and share details about their new book, Framed. Yay, there it is. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for chatting with me today and our listeners. Before we get into the book, Amy, we haven't met you yet. So if you can tell us a little bit about Freedom Warrior and your divorce coaching, I'd love to hear.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us. I appreciate all the work you do, and this podcast is part of it. So I started my business after going through divorce, not once, but twice. Learned a lot. Went into the family court system like a babe in the woods, I always say, and thought, I have to help women through this. I made mistakes. I really strive to help my clients avoid those mistakes and to take their power back in this situation before, during, and after divorce. So I have women thinking about divorce. I have some in the process and some after. And then part of my healing has been getting back to journalism. I used to be a full-time TV reporter and use those skills to shine a light on some of these issues, writing for national publications like Ms. and HuffPost and NBC News and other places, because I really feel that women have been kept in the dark a lot about this. So that's one of the reasons we wrote the book as well.
And do you work with attorneys?
Yeah, I work with clients primarily, and I do help them manage their relationship with their attorney, I would say. I think that people often think, well, how can I afford a divorce coach if I have to get an attorney? But in reality, we save you money because we help you with many tricks and strategies for using less of that attorney's time. And I always say that you've got to be the CEO of your own divorce.
Smart.
Right? You can't rely on your attorney.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to hear all about this book, Framed. To start, tell me how this book came about initially and why you wrote it.
Go ahead, Christine.
Sure. I'll go and I'll just do a brief introduction because I know maybe some of your listeners know me, but there might be new people listening, right? Yeah. So my name is Dr. Christine Cocchiola, and I have been doing this work since the age of 19, a domestic abuse, child abuse advocate, and had no idea I was with an abuser since the age of 16, and actually educate on this topic every single semester as a social work professor. And that's how insidious coercive control can be. You don't even know it's happening to you.
Of course.
And so I ended up getting my doctorate in clinical social work and pursuing coercive control and researching it so that I could really elevate this conversation about how abuse doesn't have to be physical, but that there's so many signs that are there beforehand. And we're not protecting our children in the way that we should be protecting our children. So thank you so much for having us on. And we're so grateful to be here, Ali.
I could talk to you, both of you, for hours. I have a lot to say, but we're here for your book and I can't wait to read it. So tell me how it came about.
Sure. Basically, Amy and I do this work every single day. We hear protective parent stories, divorce, people trying to escape these relationships, their stories all day long. And it's kind of like a case study book is what I would call it. We have 22 stories from the most amazing protective mothers who entrusted us with their stories, by the way. But the really interesting thing, Ali, is that their stories could be anybody's stories. We just heard about that story out in Colorado this past a couple of weeks ago where the mom was stripped of her custody because she was saying that she did not want her children to go to repair therapy with someone who was had convictions and was wearing an ankle bracelet and had sexually assaulted their child, at least one or two of their children. And we have a story in here that's similar to that. these stories are not an anomaly. It's an epidemic, but we really just want, like, for young people and old to begin to educate themselves on what abuse can look like, because abuse doesn't look like abuse initially.
It
just
sure doesn't.
No. And so how do we really empower people with these? We decided we'll ask people what the beginning of their relationship was, what the middle was when they started to have clues, and then now where they are now. And these mothers are still embroiled, many of them, in this process with family court. But the relationship in the beginning didn't start off bad. It really didn't for many of these people. And so we hope this is a warning for protective mothers. As a matter of fact, Tina Swithin, who wrote our epilogue,
I know Tina.
Yes, this book should be a prerequisite for all women. All women.
That's great.
It should be read before marriage, but definitely before divorce or child custody proceedings. And for me, that just speaks in volumes, right? This is not just for if you're going to be getting a divorce or if you're in a divorce. This is, guess what? This is a warning sign before you get in a relationship.
Absolutely. There's red flags before you get married, I'm sure. And
Absolutely.
how did the two of you come to work together?
Well, we've known each other for a while and we've worked side by side. We've shared stories of clients confidentially, of course, not names or details.
Sure.
And I think we're both motivated from our own experiences to make a change. And I think Christine had the idea of putting the stories together. I've been writing, trying to shine a light on this issue. But I think in many cases, we'd have a big story like Colorado or Catherine Kasanoff, if you know that case, and think it was going to be a turning point, right? And we've had more of the same. And so we thought, okay, we've got to shock the world with this. And that's why I think there are really 3 reasons we did it. One is to validate for the women going through it. You're not crazy. Right. You're not alone. You are not an anomaly, right? Also, like Dr. C said, we want to warn women and educate them before it's too late. Lastly, we hope that people get ticked off when they read this book. It's not an easy read. We say, it's not a beach read, but it's a must read. And we hope that the masses will read this and be shocked by what's going on behind courtroom doors enough to get involved in this social justice movement, because that's really what it is.
Absolutely. I'm just curious, how many people or how many cases did you interview?
We have 22 stories, and we could have had a gazillion stories. I mean, again, it's not an anomaly. Since the book has come out, Amy and I have been asked, would you write about our story? Would you write about our story? And Amy gets asked that all the time as a journalist, right? People want to expose their stories. The people in our book identifying information, it has been removed, except for one particular story that is Caden's story, right? And so I'm sure you, right?
I know Kathy Sherlock well.
I'm sure you do. So, but they are just heartbreaking. And I think that these moms who have experienced this, and people ask us, like, we're getting asked these questions, women in the family court underworld. Well, the reality is that women in particular are mistreated, and their children are very much mistreated in the system. And if we can help women and children, oh my gosh, then anybody who's been mistreated, that can widen. But right now, let's start with the most vulnerable.
Right.
And the most vulnerable is that we have a patriarchal system that oppresses over and over and over again a mother's desire to protect her children.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you choose your 22?
Amy?
Well, I think it was tough, but we wanted to have a cross section. Mm-hmm. It's a diverse group of women.
Sure.
And I think, I would say we start from horrific cases that get worse. And we wanted to show the reader, oh, you think this is bad? Wait till you get to the next one. I think even though we say on the bottom of the book, the abuser's playbook, know the abuser's playbook, there is that thread that runs throughout the stories.
Right.
I think each story has a little bit of a twist to it, right? Like one is spiritual abuse and the husband used the church against her, our contributor. We have one that's Ivy League scandal that involves Ivy League admissions process. And in some of the cases, women have lost custody of their kids and some they have not. I mean, those are horrific cases. We also have women who've gone through devastating financial destruction in this court system, just wanting to get a divorce.
Right.
So I think we try to really represent a cross section. The women, we should say, come from 4 countries, the US, the UK, and Australia. So we're also making a point. It's not just here, right? other places too.
Sure. It's
Absolutely.
globally.
It's globally. And when we get phone calls and it's like a mom and she's in Ohio and she's like, it's so bad here. And I'm like, yep, it's bad there, but it's bad everywhere. Like people don't actually believe that. I think that's the part of the problem, right? Is a lot of our conversations are siloed.
Right.
To Amy's point, we need a movement where this is like #MeToo, like
Sure.
literally like really front and center, because that's how horrifying it is.
Right.
Yet we are up against a huge system to do that.
Sure.
And a powerful system.
Right. I mean, I know that firsthand, especially here in Florida. Our family laws here in particular are lacking, to say the least. And I've heard some insane stories, which I'm sure you would recognize. But every day I'm just blown away by what I hear, one from the next. And I don't think truly that people are going to really listen to make a change until it happens to them, sadly.
Right. And we've seen that with this Colorado case, right? Rachel Pickrell Hawkins. Dr. C and I actually wrote a piece for Ms. Magazine that was published last week on this. And I think that story took off. It went nationally, some international outlets. And we said, think this is an anomaly? Think again, right?
Oh, I've heard a million reunification stories.
Right. Exactly.
Why do you think, I'm just curious, in a case like hers or others, why would a judge, especially if there was abuse, you said the father had an ankle monitor, like what is the logic? What is the thinking? I don't understand.
It's called empathy. So Kate Mann came up with this word, and she says that in our society, men have more rights, that we have sympathy for a man who shows up as a decent human being. And if you apply that to family court, the moment that a father expresses interest in his children, and we know these abusers are going to express interest only to hurt the adult victim. They don't really have an interest. But the moment that they do that, for patriarchal reasons, judges are looking through the lens of, then I need to give him as much time, instead of saying, wait a minute, what's the history here? Like so we have judges, female judges and male judges, who are making decisions not based on the best psychological and physical well-being of children. I mean, it's just happening over and over again. It seems like there is just a lack of, I would say there's ignorance. So let's just say I'm not educated, but it also is a lack of true care for the well-being of children.
Right. I agree with all that. And I would just tack on that. I think when you look at the history of family court in America, for example, we used to have the tender years doctrine, which basically supposed, right, that children, especially under a certain age, were best suited to be with their mother or their primary caregiver, right?
Yep.
And then when the men's rights movements really took off, this shifted to the best interests of the child. But we know that idea presupposes that the child should be with both parents no matter what.
Right.
And it often trumps, for lack of a better word, abuse claims and evidence that we see in so many of these cases in our book and these that we're talking about. There's evidence of this. This isn't just a lie, though we know that the woman is framed, right? And she's accused of lying.
Right.
I
mean, I saw that in my own story. So, I get it. It's just crazy, the stories that I hear. I don't know why they're giving them that much power when, if they're saying it's the child's best interest, I'm not sure why parental rights trumps that, as you said. Went through that myself, because what was in my son's best interest was to be with me. So, go ahead.
We live in a world where there is a lack of understanding of, when we think about physiologically, the role of mothers.
Right.
I mean, evolutionary wise and physiologically, the role of mothers is to be a protector. It's just the nature of it. There's very few in the mammal world that it's any different.
Right.
Yet, when a mother does try to protect her children, she's seen as pathological or alienating, which is kind of pathological. She's seen as crazy, dramatic, and when actually that is how we are built. So there's just truly a level of arrogance for sure. Yeah,
I agree. As you were saying, the tender years doctrine, I actually just had a conversation with a lawyer from a female-only law group here in Florida. And we were talking about that. And I was saying how I came from a divorced household. My parents got divorced when I was pretty young, and I went to live with my mother, and I saw my dad on weekends. And as I got older and I wanted to hang out with friends and do extracurricular activities, I would skip maybe going to my dad's because he lived an hour away and I wanted to be with my friends. And he let me, and he did what I wanted. He let me be the kid and the teenager that I'm supposed to be, and didn't just exercise his rights saying, no, you have to come to my house. And, I just wish more parents in general would be that way, would be understanding of, not only the child, but their relationships and who they're going to be in life.
Yeah, but that's not how I control you, Ali, right?
No.
And that's not how I control your protective parent. And that's what Dr. Evan Stark talks about, is that the children are secondary victims, not because they're not as relevant, but because they are just an apparatus. They are a weapon to hurt the primary victim. So your dad was a healthy dad. Maybe they didn't divorce for great reasons, or I don't know the circumstances, but he did not try to control you or his ex-wife by using you. The pathology of abusers is really misunderstood in the family court system, or ignored.
It sure is. Yeah. So I'd love to hear more about maybe some stories or cases from your book. I don't know if you want to share certain specifics. The floor is yours.
Sure. I was actually going to read a little bit because I feel like your podcast, of course, with Greyson's Law and everything like that, it's just so relevant to legislation and how we need coercive control legislation in every state.
Yes.
We have not criminalized it like they have in the UK and in other countries, but what we have done is we've codified it in 7 states. But what that means is that there's 43 states that still do not recognize that coercive control is a form of domestic abuse, basically,
right.
which is hugely problematic,
right.
because that means if you don't have a bruise, you haven't suffered abuse,
right.
which people will see in these stories. The first story is called Fairy Tale Gone Wrong, when it's like this story, and when you get to the end, you're like, oh my gosh, she was abused, but it's not this blatant punching someone, which is
right.
what we are always looking through, the violent incident model. And then what we're trying to do, right, with violence against women in Caden's Law, right, is to create this child safety measures.
Right.
But, on the backside of this, I've been working with policymakers discussing this piece of legislation. And the reality is that judicial has to agree to be trained by experts.
Well, I told you last time we spoke that when I initially tried to get Greyson's Law passed the first year, it had a lot to do with coercive control and changing the definition, because that's what I went through. And the Florida bar made us take it out, and it didn't pass. And it passed the second year because the family court section of the Florida bar helped write it. And of course, they left all of that out.
That's right. That's right. And so we have pieces of legislation that are supposed to do really impactful work. But the reality is that, first of all, when you have a piece of legislation, is it implemented?
Right.
Right. That's first, really.
Right.
And the backhand of that is the legislation strong enough to actually do what it's supposed to do? Because we do have this wonderful legislation crossing the country, thankfully. But the question becomes, who is going to train these judges?
Right.
So that's a big concern. So I thought I'd read a little bit from we have a call to action section.
Okay.
And I thought I'd read a little bit because I thought it kind of applies to what you have already done in Florida, which is fantastic. Important policy initiatives you can get behind. The impetus of child safety legislation is in direct response to the number of children who are murdered during custodial time with an abusive parent. Prior to 2022, I always found this remarkable when I talk about it in my college classes. There was no single piece of legislation in the United States that ensured that child safety was the number one factor in determining child custody. Concerns by protective parents about the safety of their children have historically been dismissed or entirely ignored. Protective parents know that failure to follow through with court orders may be seen as an obstruction of these court orders. It's a tightrope no protective parent should be forced to walk. Perpetrators know what matters most to the protective parent: the physical and psychological safety of the children. The coercive control or narcissistic abusers need to exert power and control. Coercive control over the adult targeted victim often is limitless, using systems to further inflict harm and wielding family court to gain more custodial time as retaliation. The intent is to harm the adult victim. Children become the casualties of this revenge tactic. Sadly, all too often, filicide, the murder of children, is the end result. In case after case, protective parents beg court professionals to heed their warnings about their children being unsafe with an abusive parent, their pleas falling on deaf ears.
Yep. It's just crazy. I mean, just to have a thought pattern that, someone's hate would trump the love for your child. I always said that Greyson's father hated me more than he loved Greyson, which is insane to me because I do believe that he had a good relationship with Greyson and he did all of that just to hurt me because he knew that was really the only thing in the world that could break me down.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And so, there's no words for the loss that you and other protective mothers have suffered.
Yeah. And I have spoken to quite a few of them. I actually met Kathy. She invited me to a golf tournament for Caden's Corner. And I spoke about my story. And then we went to Washington, D.C. together last year and toured the Capitol to try to get some more federal laws passed in each state, which is, as you said, probably beginning the hardest part. I know I'm trying to get Caden's law somehow incorporated maybe into Greyson's law just because of that same training. And like you said, part of the problem is executing. Even with Greyson's law, yes, it's a law, but what does that mean? Are the judges learning what that is? Are the lawyers learning what that is or how to use it and how to apply it? No, I hear that all the time that the judge has no idea what it is and throws it out. I've also heard that it was cited and it saved their child's life. So that's the hard part. What else you got for us?
I can read a part of Kathy's story here about Caden that I think is applicable. And I think to your point, part of this is there are a lot of people making a lot of money in this system. It is a system. Dr. Ramani, who wrote our foreword, and we're so grateful to her for that, talks about this complex. It is. Right. It's a divorce industrial complex, right? And that's what we're up against is that we can pass these laws, like in Connecticut, we have Jennifer's Law. Right. But are they being implemented? The judges don't want to be trained, right? So there has to be accountability. I think what worked in the Colorado case we were talking about is there was accountability. Right. Publicly. Public shame. Right. Media, right? That worked really well. And the embarrassment, I think. I agree. So this is from Kathy Sherlock's, and hers is the last story of the book. We're so grateful. Obviously, we could share her name, unlike the other contributors, and it's called Who Was Protecting Caden? So she says, parental rights supersede children's rights in our family courts, and this is backwards. Some people are evil and shouldn't have kids or be around kids or even humans. He wouldn't have been able to adopt and have a dog because of his violent history, but humans were fine according to family law. Caden's father's parental rights superseded her right to live. Every judge, candidate, lawyer, or court personnel I have talked to all say the same thing, that the best interest of the child comes first, but it doesn't. In practice, it doesn't. Passing a 50-50 presumption custody bill as that of HB 1397 being introduced into the House would be detrimental to the safety of kids. I should say this was part of her testimony in the state of Pennsylvania. Right. It would make it worse than it already is. Kids' safety and actual best interest should be the number one priority in all custody cases. Number one priority, the end. There shouldn't even be a discussion about it. It should be the norm. Again, it's not. Protective parents are viewed as alienators. The courts take this bogus theory written by a dead pedophile apologist, Richard Gardner, which abusers use to challenge real abuse claims or safety risks for the child over anything else, over the child's best interest. You hear the word alienation, like Jeff claimed against me, her mom trying to protect her. And all of a sudden, all other information or testimony, witnesses and experts, and all of that is dismissed or ignored by the courts. Claiming alienation works for dangerous parents. And we see that over and over again. We know that they're trained to kind of be on alert for an alienator, right? From the get-go. So it's already stacked against women when they enter family court. Right. And
well, sadly, Kathy's story and my story are very similar. as far as what we tried to do to prevent it, because both of our stories both of the fate of our child was 100% preventable. And the courts wouldn't step in for either of us. Why do you think that it's so difficult to try to do what's best for the child? I mean, clearly these other parents are not fit. Some are, and some aren't.
I think part of it is there is a deep-seated misogyny. It's something I've written about for Ms., the hysterical woman bent on revenge.
Right.
I mean, our society has programmed people to think, oh, she's mad, he's moved on with somebody else, or she's lying, right? Instead of he's a danger. And I think those systems are working all the time where they're pre-programmed. I mean, I know you want to add something to this, Dr. C.
That's it. It's a deep-seated misogyny, right? I mean, and we have research that actually, we've interviewed judges, and we have research that affirms that this is exactly what they think. They think mothers lie about abuse over and over again. They think that mothers are hysterical, that the child is okay. If the father abused the mother, it's okay. If that doesn't put the child at risk. And so, and again, I always go back to much of the research we have out there.
Right.
Like virtually all of it when it comes to child abuse, domestic abuse, is looking through the violent incident model. So even this research, when we research judges and ask them the questions, what do you think about mothers? Their response is, well, even if he hit her, the children are safe. What they're not thinking about is that his intent is to control her.
Right.
What's the pathology of the abuser? Abusers don't just hit, abusers control.
Right.
And eventually hit or harm someone in the family system.
Right.
And so that whole, in my perfect world, I would be able to give a training to everyone on the pathology of abusers, because it would expose exactly why they behave the way they do. But also, I think problematic is that when children grow up in these family systems, they actually are being treated in much the way the abuser is treating them, not the protective parent, but the abuser is treating them in much the same way that abuser was treated.
Right.
And what that does is that diminishes a child's own value of themselves. And it can recreate a victim of abuse and or a perpetrator of abuse. And so we have intergenerational trauma that's totally preventable.
I heard a lot about that actually since Greyson died, how trauma is actually inside you and gets passed down into your children and to generations, which is quite fascinating. But I will say, to what you were just referring to, in my case, the judge denied my injunction because they said the harm was to me and not my child. And I always just think that is the most asinine thinking I have ever heard. And the fact that it's not common sense that if a human being is harming a human being in any way, I don't care who it is, they are not fit to take care of a child. I always use this analogy. So Hitler slaughtered the Jews, but he'd be a good dad. I mean, it just doesn't make sense at all, which is why Greyson's law changed that here in Florida, that if one parent is harming another parent, or if there's fear of imminent danger, that a judge can step in. But it takes literally the death of a 4-year-old to get these common sense laws to get passed and to get heard. And I think that's what infuriates me, because this was it could have been so easy, or a lot easier, I should say.
Absolutely.
I think it's amazing what you've done, Ali, obviously, and you're protecting so many children with everything you've accomplished. But I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said most people wouldn't believe this unless it happens to them.
Right.
That's why we wrote Framed.
Right.
We're hoping in a small way they can empathize with these contributors. They can, starting at the beginning of the story and then see and be shocked.
Right. And be like, that sounds like me.
Right. I always say, like, if I went out on the street and interviewed like 100 people in New York City, they'd all agree with you. That is crazy. That's insane. And if people think they're not affected by this, think again. it could be you next week or next month. It's probably someone, a family member or friend.
Right.
And when we talk about the intergenerational trauma, who do you think's paying for all this? These long drawn out court battles. Like if people only care about their pocketbook, well, guess what? You still have to care about this issue because all of the services that families need as a result of these horrific situations. I mean, all taxpayers are paying for that.
Right. So let's say someone is reading the book and they see something similarities maybe into their life, and they're like, wow, this could happen. What do you recommend that they start doing? Do you like making a list? Should they get a lawyer?
We actually have a section in the book that actually details like what you can do if you or a loved one is experiencing this, because we really warning signs and how you can help, because we know that this book might be triggering for people. And as Amy said, we all know someone. We just may not know.
Right.
You know, they may not have a bruise and they may not have told anybody yet, but the reality is we all know someone. So we have a section after our action steps for advocates. We have warning signs and how you can help, because we really wanted people to have guidelines on what they can do in these circumstances. The reality, I'm sure you would agree, Ali, and I know Amy agrees. It's like victims end up escaping.
Right.
And then they end up thinking, I should have just stayed. Like if I had just stayed, this is the problem, right? A woman is safer in an alley than she is in her own home. And if she's not safe, her children are not safe. That's the reality. And so of course we're going to stay. And how do we support people and not judge them for staying? And that's, I find a lot of my work as a protective parenting coach and custody support coach. Like I'm actually like saying to people, you have to decide, is it safer for you to leave now or is it safer for you to wait? And by the way, neither place is safe.
Right. And if they stay, what do they do? Do they just play along?
Well, you know, Amy and I talk about that in our workshop, the Abuser's Playbook. Like you do actually have to, like, I have a podcast called Perfect Prey, and I call it the 10,000 foot view. And as soon as you, Dr. Ramani and I agree, like you have this radical acceptance. Okay, I know who that person is.
Right.
Now I know. Okay. Now, how am I going to navigate this relationship in a way where I don't give myself away? Because the moment I do, that person's going to retaliate, right? But how do I navigate the relationship in a way that I can see everything that's going on, I can predict it, and I can better protect myself, which is super challenging.
1,000%. I tried to do that in my situation because I knew whatever I was dealing with. I didn't know it was called coercive control, but I knew that it was like a narcissistic behavior. I was reading a book called Co-Parenting with a Narcissist. And the number one thing it said to do was don't engage back, don't text back, and just don't give them the power. And so that's what I did. Anytime he texted me something that was not nice and disparaging and humiliating, I just tried my best to breathe and let it roll off my shoulder and do not respond. Now, in hindsight, I always have these what ifs and what I could have done differently. And I'm just like, well, maybe I should have responded and maybe I should have played along with him and given him, you know, some of that power so he didn't feel like he needed to attack. But again, you can't do those what ifs through everything.
There's no way of knowing, right? And that's like, there's no way of knowing what the right answer is. But to your point, sometimes it emboldens them when we don't give them what they want.
Right.
Sometimes it emboldens them. Sometimes it calms them down. And I think it really depends on the level of pathology.
Right.
Right. Some people, they can actually, they'll move on to someone else or get their supply from someone else. But if they are really about controlling you, they're going to become hyper-focused on you. And there's no way of predicting that, though. And that's really challenging.
Do you think these are traits that people have since they're children? Abusers traits? Yeah.
So the pathology of abusers, not my theory, but the theory I believe in is that we're all born a little more ego compromised or ego resilient. And then we're born into family systems that either fortify that compromise, meaning making us more compromised and filling us with shame and a devaluing. And so then I think what I'm trying to say is there's genetic predictors for sure.
Okay.
And then the family system can either make it or break it. I'm sure Amy would agree, for every person who's suffered abuse, you can almost see the writing on the wall of how the abuser became in the family, like who their mother was, who their father was, right?
Oh my God, my story, you would die if you heard the background in there. Greyson's father was in a cult, and that was when he was right out of college. So you can only imagine what his family life was like.
Yeah.
So are there any other types of abuse that you want to mention that is in your book? Like maybe not ending in filicide, but just parents not seeing their children anymore? Or what have you seen?
I think that's one of them. I think financial abuse is a huge one.
Yes.
That in our beginning stories, I would say, like the one Dr. C mentioned, Fairy Tale Gone Wrong and Hell in Paradise are the first two. There are some real devastating consequences, financial, emotional, physical abuse of people. And I think that's one you don't see, right? You don't see the bruise of financial abuse per se, but that can range from being cut off from money. We've had people, their credit's been ruined. They've lost everything. They have no money to leave. I mean, we tell victims to leave, but then they have no access to the money to leave because they've been financially abused for so long. And they could be a stay-at-home mom, or they could be someone who works and is forced to put their whole paycheck into the family pot, right? So they're losing that agency and their financial freedom. So I think some of those stories will be eye-opening for people as it progresses to what some people would traditionally think of as domestic violence. I know we like to say domestic abuse, because it covers all abuse.
Right. And I think I love that question only because somebody recently said to me, and I hadn't even mentioned it to Amy, where they're like, well, do you have stories in there about moms who suffer the alienation, quote unquote, by the abusive parent? And I'm like, yep, we do. So we have the mother being accused of an alienator, as an alienator, children being forced to reunification camp. We have mothers who have been accused of Munchausen by proxy, which is child medical neglect. We have a mom who was basically her children, she has 3. We have several stories like this, but I'm thinking of one in particular where there's 3 children, 2 she has custody of, but her oldest is living with the abuser and totally, quote unquote, alienated, indoctrinated against her. So there's a variety of variations in the stories. But as Amy said earlier today, we were on a call, there is a thread that links them all because it's all coercion and control that is not only on the adult victim, but it is within the family system, oppressing everybody in that family system.
One core thread through everyone's cases. That's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Absolutely.
What was the best part about writing this book?
That's a great. I would
say that, we have moments where we feel powerless and upset about these situations. And I think for us, it's like we're doing something about this, right? And it has been heartwarming. We have a framed book launch group on Facebook to see. We have 550 some members at this point. People needed this book, right? Yep. It's speaking to them, sharing it. And so I think that has been a good feeling when all of us are up against this Goliath of a system. And I don't know, what would you say, Dr. C? Would you agree?
Yeah, I guess I would. I was trying to think, something. I think the good is it's always about having hope that things are going to get better, right? It was, Amy and I literally, this book came together in 8 months. I mean, talk about working. We just really collaborated super well and pulled everything together as quickly as possible because it meant that much to us to get the word out. And so our hope is that this is on every lawyer's desk. This is we would love for law students to have to read this, social work and psychology students, all these guardian ad litems and forensic evaluators. Now, frankly, the people who need to read it won't read it. This is what's going to happen. But the more that it's on a coffee table and people are talking about it, the better off it is. We just, we hope that the word is spread and that people realize. I think a lot of people cannot imagine that we have an underworld in family court. But I say to people often, we have a mafia.
We do.
There are dark underworlds. We have sex trafficking. And by the way, sex trafficking is coercive control. And there are stories of children being trafficked simply for sex in these coercively controlling relationships. So I think the rose-colored glasses need to kind of be taken off.
I agree. I always say I will always share my story for the mere factor is that I want others to hear what is going on out there. They don't believe it. I'm just a regular girl. I went to University of Florida. Who am I? This doesn't happen to someone like me until it does. And that's why I always talk about it and I will always share. I actually will be speaking at the Women in Distress organization here in Fort Lauderdale. They're having a golf tournament in November. So I'm going to be sharing my story there because a lot of their victims in Women in Distress suffer coercive control and a different type of abuse than physical that is not recognized. So I'm really excited to share that with women in distress and all the other women that might need help.
Absolutely. And I think that that's part of what needs to change, right? Is this understanding that coercive control is the underpinning of all abuse. It can be physical. And when it becomes physical, it's often the most deadly.
Right.
But it's not no abuse. Very little abuse is initially physically abusive. It starts off in this coercion and this attempt to gain control. As Amy said, the stripping of the autonomy of someone.
Right.
And then it progresses.
Well, I can't wait to read it. I'm going to pre-order it on Amazon for the listeners. It is October 1st that it comes out, correct?
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming you can get it everywhere books are sold?
Our books are sold, and what we would really love, if at all possible for your listeners, is if they've been able to read the book and get through a few chapters, if they could write a review on their bookseller sites, because that helps with the algorithm.
Right.
It just keeps the book out there. The book is actually doing relatively well in divorce and separation category and self-help abuse category. So we really just want to keep propelling the word. So.
Well, yeah. I will definitely share it as much as possible. And I can't wait to read some of those stories so I can gain some more knowledge of what is going on out there. And hopefully we can all do our part to get the word out and shed light on all of these different issues that, again, all have the same underlying core. So, well, thank you, ladies. I thoroughly appreciate you talking with me about all of this. I'm in awe of what you do, and I'm so glad you do it because we need women like you.
Thank you so much. And we need men too, by the way. Wow. We need men to care about women.
That's true.
Yes.
And hopefully, if they're raised correctly, they will.
Yeah, so true.
All right. Well, more till next time, and we'll talk soon. If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at ali@graysonschoice.org. If you'd like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at graysonschoice.org.